Worry, they will.
He'll be here.
Are we ready to go? All right, and we're recording. I don't know what that exclamation was about. Welcome to the work session for our January 3rd council meeting. We have no board and commission interviews, so we're gonna, just keep plowing on here. Is there anything on the regular agenda that anyone would like to talk about, review, change? Well, good, I'll check that off. We are then going to start with our meetings and updates. David, since you're online, how about if we start with you? It's also a way for us to know that you can hear us. Or maybe not. Okay, we'll circle back around. Sarah?
I don't have any updates today.
No updates, Mayor.
I have no updates. I have no updates.
Hi.
I don't either. Nothing.
Mr. City Attorney?
I have no updates.
And you know what, Marie? I don't either. So I know that you're going to break this trend.
I am, but I'm going to be quick for Councilman Smith because I hear we're on a time frame. So first, I wanted to give a huge thanks to Public Works. We're at 70 degrees today, so it's hard to imagine, but there was a large storm and they did a terrific job. So a large thanks to them. And then for council, over the last, I think 3 weeks, I sent you a memo on slates in terms of our medical benefit options, and then one on East Central Dispatch. Discussion doesn't need to be now, but if you have any follow-up questions, if you'd like to see this come back in terms of a work session and have some collective discussion, I would like to get that scheduled. So just think about that and I'll reach out to you all and you can reach out to me in turn. But I'd like to move forward with those discussions if needed.
I just would mention too, I did hear a lot of positive comments about how well they kept the streets that time.
They did a nice job.
Yep.
All right, David, did you have any updates for us?
No updates, Madam Mayor.
Okay, because I just, can't stand not to have one thing. It did occur to me. I don't know how many of you get the Municipal League, St. Louis Municipal League emails. They are going to have presentation on the coordinated task force for car-related crimes at the next Community League meeting, which is the last Thursday of this month. So if you're interested in it, let me know and I'll forward you the email. It's at the Frontenac City Hall.
Forwarded to me. I think the PCEB be interested in attending.
So this is for elected municipal
elected.
officials. So at some point, there may be something publicly available to them and we'll let them know.
I can report back.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. So we're going to jump right in. And I believe, I don't know, Mara is arising. So please, let's begin our city-owned property update. And I guess you gave us a handout here, or someone did.
Yes, we went ahead and gave you a handout because knowing how the PowerPoint, I have a lot of information on it, but we wanted to go through it rather quickly, not spending too much time on each slide, but we knew that you might want to look back at some of the data that we have. So the last time we met with you all was in September at a work session. Scott had talked to you about mowing of properties. He had a pretty long list, and we had talked about how there were many different ways that the different properties could be addressed. And it was the direction of council to go back, maybe try to narrow it down, figure out where each of these fell. So I'm going to start the first half of the presentation with more of the properties that could be sold potentially for development, and then pass it off to Scott with some of the ones that are more related to just general mowing, maintenance, islands, that kind of thing. So what you'll see here is that each slide has the address essentially up at the top. It has some of the documents that we use to do research. It has information on that might be important for you to understand on how large the lot is, what are some of the steps we need to take in order to make it something that is able to be sold. And then in red at the bottom of each set of bullets on the slide is more just the big general direction. Like in this case, we can sell the land. In order to sell the land, we would have to do a little bit with the legal of the lot. The lot was essentially in original plats, 2 lots, and then there's a 3rd lot to the south. It looks like over time, some area was taken away from the third lot to the south because it was all owned by the same person. So some of these have a little bit where there's some engineering needed. But if we hired an engineer to do all the various surveys together for all these different little piece parts, it could probably be pretty efficient to get all of them done essentially at the same time. So this one is 619621 Holland. We've been mowing it for a while since it went to tax sale and then eventually came to the city. It's been off the tax rolls for a while as city land, and it is something that could be buildable as one lot. Next property. This one's kind of interesting. It's a piece of property that sits so far back from the street due to the fact that the right of way for Elm used to, when they were going to be expanding and moving Elm, had changed so considerably. If we do a vacation of some right of way and do some engineering, it could create a buildable lot that would have a frontage onto the street on Rosemont. So there is potentially one new lot that could be sold and not have an area that would need to be necessarily maintained. This one's a little more confusing. It's a pretty large L-shaped lot. And you'll see there's a series of maps. And the reason why we gave you all these different maps is to help understand some key information. So up at the top in the image in the top left is just trying to show some of the utilities. You'll see there's a number of utilities that all gather at that corner of the property and continue diagonally through the property from one street to the next. It's addressed on Atalanta. The next one to the right, I highlighted in red, potentially the buildable lot that could be achieved out of everything else. And in the two lower maps, this was to help you understand there's a lot of gradation and grade changes. There's also floodplain floodway. So it really isn't feasible to create more than, say, one buildable lot out of this. We'd still have to maintain some of this, but at the same time, you could potentially get a buildable lot. Again, it's sloped. There's quite a bit that would need to be addressed, but it would be able to be a legal lot.
Hey, Mara, would you hold on
Yes.
just a second? Saw a couple of confused faces. So is this pace okay? And do you
wanna
want
go
to
slower?
ask questions per property or go back and revisit them?
I like the pace.
Okay.
Yeah, I think going through all of them is
Pictured in my
good.
Well, they are hard to picture and that's,
But so just so the questions I think we all should ask is to make sure we know where this is.
Yeah.
So that's the railroad tracks. I
This is the
can't
railroad
see-
tracks along here.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
And Atalanta and
Okay,
then
gotcha.
Marshall.
all right.
Yes.
And on that one, could you adjust that red buildable lot so it's none of it's in the floodplain, or would that make it too small to build?
It would not make it very deep, and because of the slope change in there, you would probably want to leave that last little bit to really have a decent rear yard and not have to squash the house up towards the front. But there is some flexibility. You could bring it a little farther forward. You could move it over just a hair more. You could have some areas where the utilities are within the side yard setback, so it wouldn't impact buildability. So we'd have some flexibility, but it would have to meet at least the basics of 60 feet wide. And then it has to meet the basics of being 7,500 square feet.
Just cautious, about a lot or designing.
So, and here's the thing to note, that area is potentially going to be impacted depending on how everything works with the Clomar and the Lomar with Brentwood bound. So there were some areas over here that were going to be removed out of the floodplain was going to move. And there's the potential that last bit that's in the area would move out just because it's right on an edge.
And what is the street here that's running right here?
Oh, sorry, brain not.
There's the railroad.
Yeah.
tracks. Okay.
Glenn, thank
At the
you.
top
All
is
right,
Marshall,
that's on
right?
this side.
Yep, and at the top is Marshall.
Yeah.
That's Marshall.
Yeah.
So this is the entrance here to Owen Ridge,
To what?
to Owen Ridge.
No.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes, well, where Malincrod is in the back.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay, got it.
And again, I tried to give you like the maximum house size based on the lot and some other information in case that was important. So the next one, same sort of thing, very strange shaped pieces of property. The front of them is in floodplain. So you'll see some floodplain at the front. This is also Marshall and this is Brentwood. So you've got Marshall and Brentwood. This is the entrance into the city limits. So as you continue down, here's the gas station, Sullins, the old Sullins gas station. And so these two pieces of property, there's the sign for the city that's right on the corner. So what I looked at was the possibility of creating two buildable lots. Again, you've got slope changes. You do have a little floodplain at the front edge of it. So in red, I've kind of identified these two potential lots. One is quite large, but because of the slope change and the FEMA with the floodplain, you would have to bring the house back towards the back of the lot. You would have to address the lot slope, but is still potentially buildable. Same thing with this other one. So potentially you'd have two lots that would be able to be built, one off of Marshall, the other one off of Atalanta. And again, you've got some utilities, you've got some other things to work with. They're not your standard lots, but they could potentially be buildable. And the car wash is right down over this, a little further down this way. So here's the gas station right here.
Okay.
And you go a little bit further down and then you start hitting the industrial.
So could these only be residential or is there a commercial?
They could only
opportunity?
be resident.
Okay.
Well, they're in the comp plan as residential and they're
Zoning
currently
residential.
residential.
Do we move the Webster sign? Does that have to?
It won't be impacted. So you could
Okay.
still, we would still leave the Webster sign right here.
Gotcha.
And you'd be able to access like sort of the front of the house facing towards Atalanta here and the front of this house facing towards Marshall.
Okay.
So the next one, this one's kind of an interesting one. So it's 884 and 991 Tuxedo. And there is a street that goes through it. And so the possibility would be that, you know, the street isn't needed when it comes down to how the street configuration works, that this could be, the street could be vacated. According to our maps, no utilities go under the street in that location. So we would have to get vacations of those, but you'd be able to essentially establish one buildable lot. You could potentially ask the neighbors on either side if they wanted their lots to get a little bit larger when you establish that, but it is not big enough to do two lots. It is only big enough for one.
What's
I did a
the
couple
what's the
things.
cross street there, like the triangle?
And I apologize, I should know these better.
It's okay.
Yateman? Is it Yateman and?
Yateman.
I think it is.
Gateman's the vertical.
Thank
All
you.
right, I'm just trying to understand that location, that's all.
Yeah, and we put the addresses in so that after the fact, if you want to look at them, you can
Yeah.
put them into the mapping system.
This is a unique one. I wonder if there's something else we could do with it too. I'm not that I have an idea, I just wonder.
So this one's kind of interesting. This gets into after we've kind of we're done with the buildable lots. Essentially, we're now down to areas that are being maintained in one way or another, but they have some potential issues where there's little slivers here and there. In this case, we probably need to do a deed search. There is a plat. This is the original plat here called Brentwood. Brentwood had a series of smaller lots. At some point in time, Thornton went through, and when Thornton went through and made that connection, I can't seem to yet find the plat for how they established the road. So when they established the road, you can kind of see in this lower one, I overlapped the yellow is our zoning map and our aerials. And then this is the old Brentwood plat on top of it. So you can kind of see there's these odd little bits and pieces, like part of lot 18 was left over. And that's one of the ones that we've been trying to address. It's being mowed because it's not part of the lot next to it. However, like say, for example, in block 3, lot 48, that sliver has been maintained by that neighbor. So we really do need to try to find the original plat and try to figure out how it was established, because it could potentially be that over time, St. Louis County just created another locator number for it or an address for it, or it could already legally be a part of the neighboring lot. And I did find the Lorraine Davis Estates 1966 plat, and it shows the street, but doesn't have any reference to the plat that established the road. So we kind of went back and forth, but either you,
It was after 1964 because we moved on Holland in 64 and Thornton wasn't in there yet.
so according to the 66 plat, Thornton was already in there. So the 66 plat states that Thornton was already established, at least the way that it's written.
But it wasn't there. There were houses.
Okay, yeah, so somehow there's a plat somewhere in there and we couldn't find it. And that would help us know whether some of these pieces need anything to happen or whether they would just be able to be vacated, as part of the right of way or attached to the adjacent lots. Similar one here, this very strange L-shaped piece of property. There was an old plat from 1922. Thornton was created as a street in a particular year. If this is established, because it's a corner lot and not very wide, you really can't build on it. And if you go to just vacate it, you've got issues with it being maintained. It's not really right of way. So trying to do a deed search to try to determine that would be helpful. So we have a few pieces where we would need to do deed searches. And again, we'd kind of bundle it all together into a deed search for a number of properties all at once.
Is there a house on the adjoining lot there?
There's a house on
Right,
this
okay.
lot.
I couldn't
Yep.
tell if that was. Okay,
Yeah,
it
there's a
just-
house here and there's a house here.
Gotcha.
So the one running,
It's this, so it's this sliver, it's like,
It's
looks like
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. So it's this long sliver and then it jumps out and this wide piece, it's about 25 feet wide. So it makes it, the lot itself is super substandard in terms of the overall minimum requirements in our,
Holland.
so sorry. We've got Thornton through here. This is Holland right here. And Cornell's on the other side.
Oh, okay, so then that would be Johnson House. And that house there then is 711.
Correct.
Okay, okay, I know exactly, okay.
This one is a unbuildable lot. It has a sinkhole towards the center. It's used for stormwater. It's used to connect to some other MSD stormwater systems. And it hasn't been one we've been per se maintaining, but it is city-owned property. There is the possibility to ask the neighbors on either side if they would, while we're already doing some of the other engineering, like any of that additional little bit of land before it starts to dip down. I know a number of years ago, the neighbor to the east had asked about the possibility, but we really weren't in a place at that time to talk through what all the engineering might mean. For both of them, it could mean just a little bit more to get a driveway in or to be able to have a setback that changes and gives them a little bit more room to build.
What's the cross street there? Oh, yeah, okay.
Sorry, I should have made the labels on the streets a
No,
little bit
that's
bigger.
okay. So that's where the culvert just got replaced or I know they did some work there.
This one,
Maybe it didn't.
no,
replace,
there's
maybe
another one at
repair.
Yateman further up that connects to Robinson. It's not this one that just had the culvert done underneath.
Okay, I'm sure I'm just confused then where we are.
Yeah, there's another one where it's a corner property on the north side of the street versus this being on all these maps are with north facing up.
Mhm.
And there's another one that happened further up and at a different cross street. Sorry. This one's a fun one. It's a triangular piece. It is near the Marshall Commercial District. Across the street is Maypop. And then on the north side of the street is the Little Historic District. So this is on the south side, on the southeastern corner. As you can kind of see from the photo, there's a number of utility lines that run through and in front of the property. And then I don't know if you can see from the photograph, but the slope changes considerably up to the neighbor to the east. So the thought would be that maybe this could be used as an outdoor area for the business district, possibly leased to the business district for whether it's outdoor seating or something else that they can then maintain as part of their district.
Do they have an actually formal business district?
We
So
do
this
not have,
might be a motivation for them to put one together.
they don't have a formal business district.
Okay.
Sorry, getting the mouse to work. In this case, this is Fox Place. It was platted in 1904. There's a series of alleys, and as you can see, this alley kind of dead ends and doesn't connect through. And then there's another alley in on this side. Back in 1962, this last little piece of this alley was vacated. And many people do use it to drive to access, whether it's their garage or a parking area. But there is still a tiny portion that the city's maintaining. So we wanted to research the option to vacate the alleys potentially to the neighboring properties so that it would no longer any of it be city maintained. So you've got Fox Place up here. You've got Newport on the south side. You've got Elm to the western edge and Holland on the eastern.
So it's a little misleading though, because it looks like there's an actually alley in the eastern one, and there isn't really. It's
There
just
isn't.
all vegetation now.
Not all vegetation. The vegetation's on the southern,
Outside.
on the
yeah,
south
okay.
side. On the north side, the properties that face Holland use that almost as
do.
a
Okay. I
driveway
didn't
to get
realize
to their
that. Okay.
properties. So the potential is to look at the vacation, look at maybe just vacating a small portion. There's a lot of options that could come into play.
But if it says for public use forever,
You have the ability to go and vacate as long as you vacate it to the adjacent property owners that were originally the land was taken to dedicate. So researching that, almost all of our plats have dedicated to public use forever, but there is a point in time where the city can take over and do it in certain ways. And there's a way that you can vacate.
So forever doesn't really mean
forever.
Until we decide
Until we do
forever is
something
a-
different.
yeah.
Same sort of thing. This one in the case is a paper street. So Avenue A, for many of you know, goes through in some areas, doesn't go through in other areas, connects to some lots, doesn't connect to others. The one in question that's the most important is we are currently maintaining a section down by Old Watson. So this is the Walgreens right down in here. And there's a small area that we have been maintaining. There's a lot of options or thoughts that you'd have to do in regards to whether you vacated all of Avenue A. The problem that we need to do is continue to research. There are some lots that are owned by adjacent property owners that could legally be their own separate lot. So you don't always want to take away their ability to develop, or you need to look at their option of their ability to develop.
That again, you lost me there.
Sorry. So if you look, there's a house, there's houses right here,
Yep.
on the back street. And you'll see there's even a lot line still on county's maps, and there's a square lot right here. So depending on how it was established and when it was purchased by the neighbor who has a house in front of it, it could still be legally a buildable lot if
Gotcha.
the street went through.
Still allow them access. So if you took that away, they would have no access to those lots. There'd be no ingress, no egress.
And it doesn't look like those lots really are wide enough for access.
Well, no, if this paper street went through,
Yeah.
it would provide the basic access needed to get to those lots. So doing a little more research on the ability to vacate part of that street and whether that still provides the ability if someone were potentially to want to develop in the future. Now, some of them may not be able to, they may not legally be separate lots. So we needed to do further research on all of that.
So Mara this is its own lot?
Well, so right now it has, so county sometimes gives it either the same address as the one in front, and adds the letter A to it to make it a secondary lot. Sometimes it gives it the exact same address. Sometimes county gives them a locator ID, but it comes down to our research on when the property was purchased by the adjacent property owner.
So this person owns this.
Yes.
Okay, and then this belongs to this.
Yeah, so no, this house right here owns all the way down to here.
All the way here.
Correct.
And this is the one that,
This one is owned by this neighbor right here.
but it's a buildable lot and you could have access from
And
here if.
correct. And potentially this one is also a buildable lot in here. So checking to see legally, is it a separate lot? Or is it not a separate lot?
And like terrain wise, are those?
They're
do you know?
relatively flat. Yeah, relatively flat.
If those homeowners came to us and said, look, I got a buildable lot, I need access, are we then required to take Avenue A and make it an actual street?
Well, it is an actual street. So the question is, do we have to actually put something in that would be
Yeah.
a driveway? And the answer is, I don't think we would have to do that. They could put in a driveway, they could do whatever they wanted to do. They would have the ability to do it. But once it's in, I think we would have the duty to maintain it.
Okay.
So we would have a duty or would be a private maintenance agreement?
Well, I think we would have the duty because it's a street.
Uh-huh.
So again, we would have the obligation to do it. But in order to know these things, we probably also need a title search in order to determine exactly, again, that overcomes the issues of how the county's registering this and that sort of thing. Because if I'm that homeowner, there's no reason for me to have two lots unless I'm going to develop it. Why wouldn't I make
Right.
that if it's a contiguous lot, why wouldn't I make it one? But they probably thought that when they bought both, that they merged the two. And it doesn't merge. The deeds are still separate, maybe, but a title search will tell us a lot about it. But in the end, in the last analysis, if they want to use, they could hold this whole thing up. If they said, that's my ingress and egress, then it could change what we're talking about. But we need to know more about it before we do that. And then we'll then figure out how we're going to talk to the homeowners.
And this one we can actually do before we do a deed search. We can actually just find through the county, we have an old book that we can determine and look at the handwritten information. We can usually determine if they were both owned by the same owner prior to September 20th of 1956, they are merged and they are one lot. And so the only way to, remove them from each other is for them to meet everything in our subdivision code. So it's just doing a little bit more due diligence on this one. And there's a lot of lots up and down Avenue A for 2 blocks.
And if they're merged, then it changes the entire conversation, because at that point, the concept that they could separate the plats again would require them to come forward to do the same thing to separate the lots. And again, we would then have no obligation to provide ingress or egress to that merged lot because it's the backyard of the house in front.
So right now, we're maintaining just the strip.
Just this little piece in this far end. Am I correct, Scott?
Okay.
So probably to about right in there. A lot of the neighbors do go ahead and they don't put fences up and they mow behind them. Here's another weird paper street that's not even really a paper street according to what I've researched. It looks like it was dedicated to the city. We do need to do a deed search on this one because it does have a book and page number for some additional information. There are no utilities, or there are utilities that go through it. There's MSD, there's some floodplain, and a bunch of other things like that, but it does not appear that it was dedicated as a street. Again, we can do some further research. But the key point in question is that at this very end down here is an area that gets some complaints for maintenance. So the ability to just hardscape a small area there would address some of the maintenance issues, but it's still important for us to address, like, what is this? Is it really a street? It came up when MSD was coming in. This is that corner I think we were talking about before, that did have a new inlet that went through, that recently went through, and they're making new connections and connecting through and all the way down and then all the way out to Laclede Station Road. So we've been working with MSD in this area.
What is that to the like top right?
So this is Brookside, and then these are the Brookside apartments, and then there's condos behind them. And then if you keep going, you're out at Laclede Station Road.
And is that where the complaints tend to come from?
No, it's neighbors right in this general area who see this little area. And it's not a very large piece. This one's and again, I keep saying these are all odd ones. They're all odd ones. This
All sticking around.
This used to be 404 Oak,
Oh.
but at one point in time, it was actually obtained to address Rock Hill Road and became part of the right of way. So it no longer has an address. It no longer has a locator ID. It's severely sloped. And it does have utilities. It's hard to see, but this green, heavy green line is actually a utility that goes through along the side between the two properties. Looking at this, it really doesn't make sense. It's not a buildable lot, but it would make sense potentially to plant some sedges that can be able to be maintained for the slope area, so it doesn't need to be mowed. And there's possibility of checking to the neighbors to the west to see if they did want any of the area that starts to slope a little bit, but is a little bit flatter towards their lot. But they would be impeded. It's not going to help them with like building an addition because there is a utility that goes through there. It would just basically give them some more grass area. This one's a dedicated park area. It's at Fields Crest and Grant. We found the plat that says it was dedicated, this area in red was dedicated to the city of Webster Groves. And then the rest of the plat, which has a whole series of these sort of parks and creek areas, is dedicated to the city of Crestwood. So there were some complaints because there's a grass area. In addition, there's some AT&T boxes and some plantings, but some of that area doesn't get maintained because it's not adjacent to anyone's land. So there was a discussion about potentially hardscaping some of that area so it doesn't need regular maintenance.
So what does hardscaping mean exactly? Or maybe that's a Scott question when he's ready.
On this one, particularly, it's the grass strip between the sidewalk and the street.
Mhm.
It's 18 inches wide. I would recommend just paving that and making that sidewalk be a 5.5 foot sidewalk instead of
Okay.
a 4 foot sidewalk on
Okay.
something like this.
Thank you.
Getting really close to Scott getting to come over. Ah, look at that. We timed it right for Scott. Any other questions on some of the buildable stuff?
You know what, for one, I was questioning it on, not questioning, but commented on 718. Yeah, that Thornton west of Bell was already there.
Got
And
it.
they didn't build Thornton through to Kirkham until after
So
64.
that would be that Lorraine Davis plat
Mhm.
that established that other section.
Uh-huh.
And so on the plat, it shows the area that was already built,
Yeah.
but it doesn't reference what plat it was used to do the first part.
Yeah, because there were some old houses down there.
Mhm.
That was already there west of Bell.
Yeah. So we'll do some more research to try to figure that piece out.
So before we get to Scott, and I'm sure I'm going to say this for Scott too, thank you. This is like a giant puzzle that you're putting together for us.
Honestly.
I am sure that it takes a lot of time. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You stole my words because I was going to thank Mara. She's done a ton of research on this that was outside of my bounds of knowledge. So thanks, Mara. When we met in September, we talked about some mowing letters and some parcels that according to code are already subject to maintain and mow from the edge of their property boundary to the adjacent curb line. And so this would be a sample letter that we would send to some of those properties. The picture on the right would go with it. That's a made up property. It's not even in Webster because I didn't want to show Webster property on this. But we would
choice.
show a cross-hatched area like that would show exactly what portion of the right of way outside of their boundary would be in their mowing purview. Katie did some research for me and looked up this code. One of the questions was, how long has this been part of our code. It's been since the 90s or before this is, so it's not a new code, section 31.120. She went as far back as 1998. And it says what it says in the bottom of that first paragraph, that any person who owns, leases, occupies, or exercises authority or control over any lot shall cut to the side and rear lot lines and to the curb of the pavement line or the immediate adjacent roads. So most people are already doing that in the front yards. Typically your property stops before the sidewalk and then you're still mowing the grass in front of the sidewalk to the street. So this is the same and just be on the rear and sides of some of the lots.
Slightly larger.
So we would send each property owner a letter like this.
Do we know about how many, or that's what we're gonna go through right now?
We're not going to go through all these. That's a great question. I should have an answer for. We looked at all those in September. I'm going to say top of my head, there's 20-ish.
They were all in the September.
They were in the September backup.
Then I have a.
Yeah.
That's
Around 20-ish. And some of it is depending on what we do with some of these other properties, more or less with sellable lands. The railroad areas, we've been maintaining quite a bit of the railroad areas. So we are going to be crafting a letter to the railroads to tell them that they need to maintain their areas. Additionally, there are some areas that are under lease from the railroad to various entities, and those entities should be maintaining their portions of it. For instance, this little grassy area right here is under lease to the parking lot. And so that one ought to be maintained via their lease and not us mowing. There may be some of these areas around the railroads that we're just gonna have to go in and keep
Yeah.
doing for sightlines and for safety sensitive. But we need to put the railroad on notice that it's their property. They ought to be taking care of their sightlines and their safety issues as well.
Do we know who's leasing that parking lot?
Yes. It's the,
I don't really need to know their name.
yes, we do.
But I do think it's worth noting here how difficult the railroads are to get them to move on any of these things. And so, we're moving forward on all this. This may be the one place that we're going to have to fall back just for safety purposes. And we have no leverage with the railroads.
And there's quite a bit of railroad land
Yeah.
that runs through town that we're
Mhm.
currently mowing and maintaining. And some of it can be done maybe to a lesser extent, depending on where they're at. Right here, we've got several crossings. So anywhere those crossings we're gonna have to take care of those site triangles at the intersections and such.
Well, we go back on that lessee, whoever leasing that land, let them go back to the railroad and they can do it.
Well, I'm not worried about that portion of it. I'm worried about the portions that the railroad just has refused to examine or acknowledge or even move one iota on, even after repeated requests from Public Works, from my predecessor, from me. I know the city manager's office has been involved. We just have no legal leverage over them.
Can we do just like we do all other property owners, mow it, send them a bill? Not,
Except that we don't have the ability to tag it with a lien if they don't pay it.
okay.
So we can do that and send them a bill, but we're probably costing ourselves the cost of mowing plus the postage.
Sorry, just my frustrations there.
This is another railroad area up in Old Orchard. So it's specifically, that's Old Webster. My bad. That's Old Webster. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's the backside of Old Webster. That's behind Straub's and the plaza there. Sorry, I was looking at the other direction. I was looking at the top side.
Yeah, and it's across the
Yeah.
railroad tracks that they never do and let grow
Like by the gym
forever.
center.
Yep.
Yeah.
So another one where we would be sending something to the railroads there. Island maintenance. So there are, oh, am I out of order? There are several islands that we've talked about back in September as well. So I've got some more information on those. We won't hit all of these in real depth, but this is 44 and Elm interchange. So MoDOT has agreed to put a lot of this back on to their mowing list and have that done under their contract, as well as the school district picked up some of this land on this corner, on the southeast corner. So they will have a little bit more of that green space along the outer edge there. Again, some of these islands, some of them need deed searches, some of them we just need to determine if we're going to enforce that code. And this one would be one where we would likely look to enforce the code and have the property owner mow this triangle that is adjacent to their property out to the curb line. So they would get a letter with that. On all the islands that are in neighborhoods, we've crafted a contract that we would like to send out to the adjacent property owners around 160, 185 feet around those islands. We let them know that our intention is that we're looking to do things differently, looking to see if anybody would like to maintain these islands as turf grass. And if so, there would be a contract that we could sign with them, allowing them to do that. And then if not, then we would be looking to convert them off of turf grass into some sort of decorative gravels, some sort of wood chip, some sort of alternative product that does not cost weekly maintenance to go out and do it. I have some costing for those decorative gravels. There's a couple different varieties to go to. Some of them get pretty pricey depending on how decorative those gravels are versus, your typical kind of Merrimack gravels, which are the colored rocks that you see in the bottom of the Merrimack River, versus Iowa Lake, which is what we used on a little bit of the strip behind the firehouse. It's a little bit larger stone, a little bit nicer looking. So we've got some costing on each of those. But the first thing would be to see if any of the residents around or the neighborhood groups would like to keep those islands in turf and maintain them. This contract would be a 1-year contract that would renew annually unless either the city or the group mowing it decided not to continue to maintain it.
And were these the ones that we had pictures of last time where there was like a tree or like low maintenance shrub or something like that? So
Yes.
it's like still some life there.
There are,
Yeah.
yeah. Lots of them still have plantings on them other than turf. There are some that are only turf. And we've got a few pictures coming up on these. I'll try to be very quick on these since we already reviewed most of them. This one's kind of behind Hickson School. It's this circle that's actually in the midst of MoDOT's right of way at one point. It is all grass. There's only 3 houses that are adjacent to that circle. So that one, only has turf grass, doesn't have any other lively things on it. Sunningwell, just a very small little triangle. It's about 1,200 square feet. Webster Gardens has 7 islands. Some of them are just grass. Some of them are actually almost fully planted out. Some of them just have a tree on them. Total there's about 9,400 square foot worth of island space in those 7 islands.
So are we maintaining plantings and things that are there, or are those ones that the neighborhood is already kind of?
So we're mowing them. We don't maintain. So a lot of them have been planted by the neighbors.
Okay.
And they kind of go out and maintain those plantings themselves. If there's trees that are out there in the right of way, I would likely imagine that we're maintaining those larger trees. But there's a lot of daylilies and things like that out there that don't take a ton of maintenance, but somebody's still got to go deadhead
Right.
and touch them sometimes. Mostly those in Webster Gardens area have been maintained by the neighbors. Girard Drive is right off Watson Avenue. It's you come in, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 islands in this little subdivision, totaling 12,000 square feet. A couple of them we've talked with the fire department about. It's very difficult for them to even get around safely, to get around these outside islands. It's too small of a turning radius for their larger rigs. So that would be something that we would look to the neighbors to potentially maintain and or move some of those over to gravels, or possibly even remove the outside ones if the neighbors were amenable to those. Ronald Drive is a fairly large circle. It's one of the larger ones at 5,000 square feet. Just itself, it is only grassed in right now. Webster Park has several islands throughout the park. This one, we haven't been able to locate exactly. Webster Park has been maintaining these through the years. We can't, at one point, all the streets were private streets. They were turned over and made public streets. We have not been able to lay hands on anything that discusses the islands inside the streets, whether those also stayed private or whether those became public as well. We have not been maintaining them, but we had been providing a stipend, small stipend to Webster Park Neighborhood Association through the years to help offset some of that mowing space. That was not included in this year's budget, that stipend. So it was $1,500.
And we don't pay a stipend to any other neighborhood
We do not.
for maintenance.
And there was no, I can't find any agreement on that stipend from the neighborhood association or from myself or the current public works director, previous public works director. None of us have any written agreements on that. So we think it was probably a handshake agreement. Some point 90s or before that happened. It has increased. The cost has increased a couple times. I was told it was originally like $750 and it went up to $1,000. It's been at $1,500 since I've been here, but again, we have no documentation on that.
It didn't exist in the 80s because I grew up mowing one of the islands. in Webster.
There you go. There's new history for us.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, I just scrolled the wrong way. I hit the roller. I think that was it. There was, I thought I missed Rock Hill, Helfenstein. There's a very small portion that's grassed here. The neighborhood association is actually maintaining the area behind the sidewalk. Then there's a sidewalk and then there's a little grassy area about the size of this desk right here that we mow. So that would be something that we would look to see if whoever's maintaining the planted area behind would also like to mow
Plants them
those three
more.
strips. Yep. So our goal would be to contact the neighborhood associations soon, if you are agreeable to this plan, and get that out to them to see if anybody would like to maintain any of those as turf in front of their houses. And then if not, we'll start working our way towards moving those over to a more sustainable product where we don't have to touch it every other week. We would not be able to do all of this year, this spring before mowing season, possibly not even this calendar year. So it's going to be a process that we're going to be working towards. Assuming we're going to convert all the islands and nobody wanted to maintain any, we would not be able to do it all in 1 year. So it will be a process that we'll be picking off. And I don't have a schedule on which one would go first or second at this point either. But so basically we're looking for, is this plan agreeable to you guys? Do you not like this plan? Can we move forward with this?
So let's do this in two parts. You showed a letter and I think we sort of tentatively agreed that in our last discussion, but we find with charging Scott with going ahead with property owners that the code says what the code says, and now we're going to go by the code. Are we good with that part of it?
And that's only the islands and things that can adjacent to their home or across the street from their home.
It
It's
would be
also the
across the
right-of-ways.
street, it'd be adjacent to the home up to the next street's curb line.
What'd you say?
But it's also the right of ways. So,
Right of ways.
yeah.
All right, so that one's a green light. All right, island and talking to neighborhood associations, are we all right with what Scott presented? All right,
Thank you all for your time.
look at that, an answer this time for you.
And what about buildable lots? Do we need to make any movements?
I don't
on that?
think the plan was to make any decisions on that at this
Okay.
time, especially since Mark gave us a whole lot of data on a whole lot of lots. So I would suggest that we all review it and that becomes the next discussion. Or were you two thinking something otherwise?
No, you're absolutely right, Mayor. So the majority of you in different fashions have asked about the city-owned property for various reasons. So if you would review the packets provided by Mara, and if there's additional information you would like, please let me know. But at some point in time, I'd like to bring this back to a work session and learn from council what it is you would like to do with those potentially buildable lots. In the meantime, we're going to move forward with doing the deed searches and the additional research that Ms. Perry talked about, so we can have the lowdown on each of the lots.
And this is all of the city lots
As well as the unbuildable lots, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
and this is all the lots the city own.
There are, I believe, 4 additional ones. We left 4 off the table. or three or four.
There's about three other ones that weren't in this conversation.
So those three have some contractual or deed issues that we're still researching. So you will hear about those pretty soon.
Thank you.
They're really interesting too.
Scott, thanks to you as well. I know you've spent a lot of time working through this and we are grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
Scott.
Scott.
All right, next thing is the boards and commissions update. I hope my fellow committee members don't mind that I did a quick little PowerPoint so we could go through it. I, of course, made no notes for myself from the PowerPoint, so we're going to go from there. So as you all know, a subcommittee was put together to review the chapter in our ordinances about boards and commissions. There were a lot of things over the last couple of years that came up that people suggested that we needed to change. And so what I thought we'd do today is talk about the major changes. There are a couple sections that I think you all need to review carefully. This will have to be done in an ordinance, or it will come back to a regular meeting. So this is really just here's a progress report, and do you feel good about what we've done as a subcommittee so far? And I hope that the subcommittee members, obviously you included, David, will chime in as we go along. I bulleted up on these two slides that what I would consider the major changes that we're making. One suggestion that came from Eric, and it makes a lot of sense, or made a lot of sense to members of the committee, was take all the business district language, which is incredibly repetitive, and move it to its own section so that we could standardize some of that. And there are things in there that probably don't need to be in the ordinance. And so for our discussion today, we're going to sort of set that to the side. As long as you're okay with us putting that in a separate chapter, Eric's going to bring back the draft for us to look at those changes. And I'm just going to list these out and then we'll talk about a few of them in more detail. We did define and limit terms for members of certain boards and commissions. We also, for the first time, put in a definition of the role of a city council liaison to a board and commission. And then all of these different boards and commissions had their own language about create your own rules, or here are your rules, or this rule is different for this commission as opposed to that one. So we did create a set of universal bylaws for consistency across boards and commissions. And you can go to the next one. We also, in consultation with Mara and our discussion over time about some need for expertise on the Plan Commission, changed that requirement. So 4 of the members have to have, and we defined it pretty broadly, some related expertise. The Arts Commission has asked for language that better reflects what they're actually doing. So that's in there. And then there are 3 non-functioning boards and commissions that were removed: Financial Advisory, Police and Firemen's Retirement Fund, and the Farmers Market Commission.
But so didn't we just kind of briefly talk about having some type of a financial advisory board? I mean, would it be better to like restate what that is rather than just to remove it or rethink what that needs to look like?
So committee members can jump in if they want to. There was some discussion of that. And I think, we're going to have more discussions about our financial policies and things like that. It seemed that that was a better place to decide whether we needed a financial advisory board rather within this subcommittee. Because the subcommittee, it was unclear how we were going to define what their job is. And I think we need to understand what we need from them in order to write a good description of what that might look like. Is that a fair interpretation?
That's a fair interpretation.
Okay. So just a few details on some of these others. And again, at the end, we'll just find out whether people have any changes they want to make or suggestions. So forgive me if I'm going through this kind of quickly. Feel free to stop me. So one of the things we did was standardize the terms of service to 3 years for every board and commission, unless state law requires it to be different than that. So I think it's Plan Commission's required for 4 years. And there's some other things like that. We can't supersede state law. So members can serve for 2 terms. However, recognizing that we sometimes have difficulty filling things, there is language that says it's there. If an open position has been advertised for 45 days and there are no new applicants, we can reappoint the person if they want to be reappointed. So that would be that. So it gives us a little flexibility, but also has a term limit. No, you were right. We did define the role of a city council liaison, and we took that language, basically borrowed it from other places and cobbled together something. So please review that and let us know if there are questions or concerns. And then we created a set of universal bylaws for consistency's sake. Neil had just written a set of bylaws for the Charter Review Advisory Commission or Board, which they adopted. Those became the basis for this universal set of bylaws.
So they're impeccable.
And again, if you will just take some time to review those impeccable guidelines and tell us where they're not impeccable, that would be great.
That'll be a short conversation.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I didn't, excuse me.
Sorry.
You sidetracked us. We were flipping along.
I know we discussed it. I don't know if it belongs in the new bylaws, but making sure that we knew if my term ends in September, that we start looking in July to replace that person.
So yes, we did discuss that. And I think the way we ended up there was that we would discuss the policy. That's a policy rather than an ordinance
Okay.
thing. And that we can discuss that with the city clerk and make sure, we put together sort of a basic outline, and then that's something that obviously our invaluable city clerk needs a little more input on too.
Right.
But the 45-day part of this only works if we're really early on
Right.
trying to seek openings, seek people to fill openings.
Yeah. And then there was a conversation that we had that we're going to ask the council liaison to be proactive in trying to fill those. positions.
Exactly. So, and this is, come up repeatedly over the last several years to make sure that we have some level of expertise on the plan commission. And so this is language, to be honest, I don't remember where it came from. Maybe Mara gave it to us, I think, when we asked. But it,
Yes.
as you can see, it's a pretty wide set of occupations and professional background for this definition of expertise. And then again, it does restate that we got to abide by state law, and this commission is a 4 years term.
And then I noticed that we eliminated pretty much everything after that, and we're tying it to I guess this specific statute that's in here. I mean, when I was reading through this, I was
Yeah.
just looking at.
So a lot of what got eliminated is when we put the universal bylaws in there, these boards and commissions had their own set of language about how they established bylaws or what their rules looked like in terms of electing officers. And that's what we deleted so that they would all go with the universal bylaws that say, here's when you, here are the officers on the commission that you elect. Here's how long they serve.
Okay.
And those, then you will keep minutes, because a lot of that language was in very different ways in different sections. And so it's just a matter of really trying to be consistent across the boards and commissions.
And a lot of the excessive detail was more applicable to the architectural review board than the other.
Yeah, and some of those, like the ARB, has its own separate ordinance that defines a lot of that detail, and it's not really in their establishment as a board or commission. I think we, and so this reflects, so the Arts Commission, as I think we all know, the Arts Commission has expanded what it's done over time. It was originally created simply to buy and place public art. And over the time, it's begun to partner with organizations and have events. This is just an additional paragraph that goes with their statement of what their purpose is that reflects that. And this is what they've asked to be submitted. All right, we'll keep going, Eric, because, So here are essentially the basic changes we're making. Are there any parts that, anybody wants to really have a detailed discussion of right now? The way this would proceed is that if we're in agreement that at least the basics of this looks good, we'll formalize the language, connect it with Eric's language on the business districts and bring it back as an ordinance for consideration in a regular meeting. So we're not done. We can make any changes we want to make, even not without amendments. And so the point right now is to say, is there anything that you want to say, stop, we need to discuss that more, or fine, it looks as if things are going the way we expect them to. I'm going to stop talking now.
I'm good with it.
I did have a couple questions.
Yeah,
and I don't know
please.
how granular you want us to get.
No, I think it's okay.
Okay, so, I just, the difference between a special committee and an ad hoc committee that was, listed in the bylaws that the.
Let me
commission's
defer to
before.
the city attorney.
So there's not a significant difference between the two. So special committee is going to be a committee that's appointed for a specific purpose and and that's not necessarily planned. So it would be, any special committee would be one that we've determined that there's a need, let's appoint you. That's also the definition of an ad hoc committee. There's a reason that's come up, it wasn't otherwise provided for, you're giving them a specific purpose to address. So the two, in my opinion, would be interchangeable. They're speaking of the same.
So there's two, but there's two different paragraphs. Can we make it one?
Yeah, in my opinion, you could.
Okay, that was
Okay.
one question. And then the other one was just with the Art Commission talking about, its purpose prior to this new paragraph.
Yep.
I just thought it would be nice or would be, good to broaden the purview of the Arts Commission. I think it says something like painting, sculpture, and other work. If you could just change it to the visual arts or something, and then that's a broader term to apply to physical art.
And so I think in the Arts Commission, we talked about that a little bit, and their view was that additional paragraph, because it doesn't define, does it define? I can't.
It's not in the additional paragraph, it's in paragraph before.
No, can we have that paragraph back that they want added? Sure. Please.
So this would go after the paragraph that talks about the different types of art.
Would actually be the first paragraph in their
Before.
section. It would go before it. And I think in that way, because they didn't define the arts so specifically, that would be, I think in their mind, it would cover that. But certainly we can go back and look at that of how to, so you wanted visual.
Well, it seems technically when you talk about the arts, I think you talk about the performing arts and you talk
Yeah.
about the visual arts. And it doesn't seem, I think it would be good to get that language in there.
Okay.
Instead of trying to define each discipline.
Right. Okay. Excellent. All right. I thought you had more granular for us.
That's it.
All right. So are we comfortable proceeding and then bringing this back to a regular meeting with Eric's additions?
Yeah, and then the other one that's newly created basically is the Business Development Commission, right? And that was to address our thoughts that we wanted to try to do something to make all of these different business districts a little more cohesive. And then
Right. So that's my understanding. I mean, I don't know how long it's been around, but it is relatively new, but yes, that was the purpose, and it's changed in this. And I outlined the major changes. I would ask you to go back and look at the full red line of the document, because, for example, in the BDC section, because it's just so difficult to get someone from the Yorkshire shopping district that comes out of there. And it's a business owner at large instead. So there are some other changes in here that you need to take a look at, but we focus on the major ones. But are you suggesting you'd like to revisit what the BDC does, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, just looking at this, because I mean, it sees, because like I said, I can see where we kind of crossed out Crossroads or Yorkshire. We had three, and I guess I should know better all of the different districts that we have. But it seems to me that our objective here is to try to get a more cohesive group.
Right.
Looking at how they're all impacting the city as a whole.
I think Eric.
And just to add in for the members on that, the three business districts are essentially special revenue districts, meaning that by state law, their function and purpose can only be applied in the district, right? So Old Webster, Old Orchard, Crossroads, as created by the city, those functions can only be funded and happen in that area. So by their nature, that advisory commission is going to be inward looking, right? Old Webster is going to look at Old Webster. What can we do in the Webster district? I think BDC, however it was intended, certainly you can see the cohesive nature, but also what do we do for other areas like Marshall, Yorkshire, which is not in a business district, Owen Ridge, which is one of our, our largest pieces of commercial property, in other places, and then the business community as a whole. None of the three advisory commissions are charged with bringing you ideas on how to help business communities that aren't in their district. And the BDC really ultimately, the way we're operating now is really to look at that, the business climate as a whole. What do we do? And that's, to bring advice and recommendation to you about the business climate of the city is how we see it. But I do think there are missional questions, right, for the BDC about where does the council want it to go? I'm looking forward to the conversation with the chair about what does the council want to tell BDC about, how are we going to do this? Are we talking about the merging of districts? I'm not saying we are, but is that a strategic vision? Is it economic development plan across the whole city? Those kinds of questions, I think the BDC is looking for just as much as you may be looking for to the BDC for what's it doing. So.
All right, any other discussion? Okay. Then we will bring that back when we can get all our ducks in a row here. Appointments to boards and commissions. Obviously, we didn't have any interviews. Mike Clay, who interviewed for the Plan Commission, I think, has indicated he is interested in serving on the library board. There is an opening in the library board. Do we wish to appoint him to the library board?
Yes. All
right. Why don't we then take a 5-minute adjournment and we'll be back to start on time at 7:45.
Hey, Pam.
This regular meeting to order. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council. We welcome questions, ideas, and comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may, however, comment only when recognized by the mayor or the mayor pro tem. We ask that your comments be limited to 3 minutes. If you are on Zoom and would like to make a comment, you may use the raise your hand function and we'll call on you. We appreciate you being here. And I think we'll start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander, Councilmember Richardson,
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, and we will move to remarks from the community and visitors, and we start with Dave Buck.
What a way to start the new year.
Happy New Year, everybody. Dave Buck,
Happy New
184 South Elm. This shares 2 simple, easy, and free ideas that I think can improve your city council regular meeting agenda, starting with your next meeting on January 17th. Both are borrowed from the regular meetings of the Webster Grove School Board. So Emerson, you should be very, very familiar with this. Immediately following Katie's roll call and before remarks from the community and visitors, like right now, open every meeting by adding 2 things in order. First, the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag has been there for over 20 years. Pledge takes 10 seconds. In the 23 years I've lived here, it's never been said in a city council meeting, ever, not once. And I don't know why. And I've asked the question at least 5 times over the last 20 years. I've gotten no answers. as to why. It's interesting that on the other hand, you got some major bodies that do the pledge before meetings and sessions, like the United States Senate and House, the Missouri State Senate and House, and closer to home, the city councils of Kirkwood, Rock Hill, Brentwood, Sunset Hills, Manchester, Baldwin, Chesterfield, and list goes on and on. The point is not everybody says it. You don't have to. It's your choice. And I know that. And my guess is that even some of your own residents will be opposed to it for several reasons. So it is your choice. But I hope you choose wisely and choose to say it, because I think every pledge we make humbles and reminds us that we are all united as one country in liberty and justice, and that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves here in Little Webster Groves. Here's the second idea: celebrations from city council and city staff. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you guys do a really good job in your work sessions of recognizing your boards and commissions. Marie did it tonight with Public Works. That's great. And in your regular meetings, you do occasional proclamations, big, long written proclamation, the photo op, the ceremony, everything down there. It's great. Nobody's saying anything against that. What I'm talking about is to do what the school board does, where they standardize such celebrations at the beginning of every regular meeting. There's no ceremony, there's no proclamations, there's no photo ops. It's just a shout out. It's just some verbal recognition by you all of people in the community. And not like the leaders and stuff like that, the usual suspects. I'm talking about taking a page out of Sports Illustrated's great feature that they've run for decades called Faces in the Crowd, where they recognize unsung heroes,
Time.
the ordinary. I know, and nobody else is here, Katie, so I'm going to keep going for a few minutes.
How about for 30 seconds?
30 seconds. But they recognize unsung heroes, ordinary residents that do extraordinary things every day for the good of the community. For example, because of my diabetes, I eat a pure egg omelet at Boardwalk Cafe every morning at 7 a.m. sharp. Have any of you been to Boardwalk Cafe? I would say they deserve a shout out. They are Webster's beloved greasy spoon, hole in the wall diner. The people are great. The customers love that place. They work their butts off. They're slammed every day, if not every weekend. And I'm telling you, I think it would go a long way. It only takes a few seconds to celebrate somebody. But man, it matters a lot to people. So please think about it. Please adding those two things to your agenda starting January 17th.
Thank you, Dave. All right, do we have new business from council members, city attorney, city manager? No. All right, then we will proceed to unfinished business. And I believe there's a question about whether we would like to reopen the public hearing for bill number 9209. That's what's written on my notes, and I don't know anything more
I
than
think
that.
there was a question we were supposed to,
Yeah, so
Wasn't here last week.
correct. So would we like to reopen the public hearing to hear from the owner?
Yeah.
yes.
Sure.
Do we need a formal vote on that?
You do.
Then and then we need a motion, I bet. So,
I'd like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing for bill number 9209 so that we can hear from you.
Second.
all right.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes. All right. Mara, do you want to do any preview of this or introduction or anything? I can, but I think you know more.
So just as a reminder, we had one important question, which was related to the hours of operation. I was able to give a little bit of how I thought they were going to operate, and we were going to ask the question about whether 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. made the most sense, and whether there was an opportunity or need to put additional provision on how they operated in terms of entrances prior to 6 a.m. And so it was asked that potentially the owner who was not available at the last meeting to come back and answer those questions. I couldn't do it very well. And then just so you know, I know she also did the research, but most of the coffee shops in Webster Groves open at either 7 or 8 a.m. And if you kind of look in general, but she is available to come up and answer any questions. Anything else you need from me?
I don't think so. So if you'd like to come forward, please introduce yourself to everyone. And obviously you now have the lay of the land. So
Lauren Knowledge, owner of Balkan Treat Box and soon to be Telva at the Ridge.
so the question, I think, maybe I'll turn this over to a council member who was concerned about this. David, I know you had some questions about opening times, and so I think I'll let you go ahead and ask those.
Yeah, I think my main question is just one is do you guys envision opening at 6 a.m. or you just want access to the building? Like what's your game plan or what's your initial thoughts as you proceed?
I think since I talked to Mara after the last meeting and heard the concerns, I think it was more of a research, giving some time to figure out what Webster really needs. And having the option if it was an earlier situation, but everybody I've talked to that does coffee here says 7 a.m. is like the magic number. So
Well, I'm okay with the 6 a.m. to a certain extent. Like what I would rather do, and this is where we get into a little bit of legal trouble, I think, is I would like to give you the 6 a.m. but in the event that it's not working, I can't take it away too easily. Like council can't take it away too easily because it's a vested right to some degree. So I question whether we give you would you be opposed to us giving you a 7 a.m. and then in the event things are going swimmingly and you want a 6 a.m. that we can come back and try out a trial run of some form or fashion if you need a 6 a.m.
yeah, that sounds good.
I think it's gonna work out either way. Like I think a 6 a.m. is gonna be perfectly fine there, but I understand the neighbors' hesitancy and also just wanting to keep a careful eye just to make sure we don't do this everywhere and create problems.
So I actually think 6 a.m. is an excellent time to open because we tend to be an early morning coffee drinking family and there's not a lot of options before 7 a.m. And so I don't know. I don't see the issue with opening that early. I can't imagine you're going to be just drowning in traffic, at 6 a.m. But if you have the willingness and the appetite to do it, I would say go for it. I think it's really exciting that you're expanding and that you're doing it in Webster. I think there's so much to be celebrated here. So really excited.
Well, thank you.
Another question. So is it your deliveries will start at 6 a.m. or you?
I wish, no.
Oh. So,
No.
so there was a conversation about the deliveries.
Yeah,
So what time were your deliveries?
I mean, I've never gotten a delivery before 8 a.m.
Okay.
So I don't imagine, and this is gonna be, so we're doing a lot of our prep out of Balkan Treat Box. So the volume for that space for deliveries is gonna be so minuscule that even if I asked for an early delivery, I wouldn't get one.
Correct me if I'm wrong, council member. One of the concerns were early deliveries.
Yeah, the concerns were the neighbors that are right next to the business.
Yeah,
And early deliveries next to those residents with doors opening and closing. I know when it's really easy to say, well, it won't be an issue and it's not that much, but if you're the one that's living next door and you're hearing doors open and shut
oh,
at
completely.
5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, it could be a little, disruptive. But
Yeah.
that's what the question was more so with the deliveries to the business at that time in the morning while you're prepping to open, what would that look like?
So. Sorry, I thought. I'm trying to figure out if that was a different question.
So let me try it a
I think
different
they're
way.
two kind of questions.
They're pretty similar. And one of the things that we discussed at our last meeting was the possibility of saying, if any delivery came before like 8 o'clock, if you take it from the Gore Avenue side rather than the back side of the building, which is adjacent to residential, because I think that's where
Right.
some of the discussion had. It doesn't sound to me like you expect any early morning deliveries, but if it were the case, would you would you have a problem taking them from the Gore side?
No, I think it's
Okay.
so small. I think the
Yeah.
deliveries will be small enough that that's totally a possibility.
And those semi-tractor trailers.
No, none that I can think
So
of.
my next question then, was your business plan built on opening up at 6 AM?
Yes. However, we haven't committed to hours because we're still working on the pastry production schedule. So essentially, if, we can't get somebody to, let's say, come in at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, that's going to put us behind a whole hour, in which case we wouldn't be able to open until 7. But
And when
as
you're
of-
saying 2 a.m, 3 a.m, you're talking about the old orchard
Balkan.
location.
I'm talking about Balkan Tree.
Yeah.
Farms.
Yes, right.
Yeah, so if it's all kind of dependent on that schedule, which we're working on now. But ideally, yeah, we would be able, because we feel like we're in a business district, but we're in a neighborhood. So we feel like there is a little bit of a market for an early morning coffee situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally fine with an early start, this is a 6 AM start with early deliveries, maybe before 7, if there are any by like the stroke of
Yeah.
luck, right? Off of Gore, and I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah, I would recommend just
same.
keeping it 6 AM. That was their request. So keep
Yeah.
it.
I'm with you.
So if you don't mind not going anywhere for a second, I know that Lynn Kressler, I see her as the owner of Rolling Ridge, is on as well. I don't know, Lynn, if you want to make any comments. If you don't, that's okay. But I just wanted to give you the opportunity in case you did.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I don't have anything to say, but I just reiterate what we said, and I'm sorry I missed the last city council meeting also. The holidays were crazy. But when we talked with the plan commission, I mean, Rolling Ridge is so excited to have Lauren and her crew coming in. We open at 9, our employees start arriving around 8:30. I would love it if I could get there early and have a coffee. Again, whatever works for Lauren is best for us. We're just very excited to have them in the building, and we just can't wait to see what wonderful things they'll do.
All right, Lauren, thank you very much. Does anyone have any final questions? All right, thank you very much for
Thank
being here.
you.
Thanks for your contribution
Thanks
to
for
our
everything.
community as
Yeah,
well. We appreciate it. So we have to now end up at a place, like a specific place. And that's, I think the questions are, what goes in the CUP in terms of the defined opening time? Do we put anything in there about deliveries specifically? And so,
I think we can close the public hearing.
oh, we need to do that first,
Yes.
right? We do. All right.
And-
Do we need a motion to close the public hearing, or do
Yes.
I just do it? Okay.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
Everyone's
And,
enthusiastic.
and because there've been no additional documents, there's nothing, do you have a document?
I just, in the last PowerPoint, at the last meeting, I did have some language on one PowerPoint slide. So I did want to just reiterate what I had on the PowerPoint slide, which was an optional condition with language. Access to the coffee shop use prior to, and in this case, it was 6 AM opening time, will be from the Gore Street entrance. So that was language that, if that gives you a starting point.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Laura.
much.
So since there are no additional exhibits, the record would remain the same, but for the additional comments this evening.
Councilmember Franklin?
Are we voting on just to close the public record?
Closing the
Yes.
hearing.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Okay, so now we're to the specifics of the CUP. And so opening time, delivery restrictions, as the language Mara just brought us, or with some changes in time. So where do we want to end up here?
Well, the recommendation was from CUP that they will open business at 6 AM.
And that's in the CUP, so that would not require any changes, correct?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't think I think accept the CUP as.
All right,
Okay.
is there anyone who wants to make specific changes to the CUP? Let's go at it that way. Maybe that's the better way to do it.
So I thought
I mean, the delivery one, for
Delivery.
sure, what Mara suggested. I'm okay with the 6 a.m. because frankly, it doesn't sound like she's gonna use the 6 a.m. start time, but I am a little hesitant about what our recourse is if there is a problem.
Well, then I'm also concerned, somebody else open up another business. We want to try to change their opening hours based on comments that, don't fit their business plan.
Would you remind us, Neil, what the problem David's referring to is?
So his concern is, once you've granted the CUP, can you violate it? You can if it becomes a nuisance. And if there's a complaint that's filed and it's deemed to be in violation of our standards, whatever those other standards might be, like noise and what have you, then under those circumstances, you could seek to revoke the CUP. It would require a hearing. And the process is, there's a due process element that would have to be adhered to. It can be done, but it's formal because you want to make sure you're giving the CUP holder all of the ability that they would have in terms of the access of law, but it can be done.
I mean, I would like to take Lauren's assurances that it's not going to be a disturbance in the event that they want to open at 6 a.m. It is just foot traffic that's basically going to be entering the Gore Avenue entrance, meaning the commercial side of the business. And so I'd like to stick with the CUP and what the Plan Commission forwarded to us.
Other comments?
And the only thing that.
I'm on board. All I'm saying, we have five elements. And none of those 5 elements are what is the personality or the likely, the ability to like the owner of the property. And so I just want us to be careful about going down that path that we are now judging potential CUP people based off of, do we like them? Do we think they're going to do a good job, rather than what the 5 elements are?
I don't think
But-
that's a
but
fair
the-
comment.
Yeah, I think the 5 elements have already been approved, based on the 5 elements, the CUP has been approved. So I'm not sure why we would review that.
Well, we have to approve it.
Right. And I'm,
Can we just vote?
yeah.
Well, we can, but so we'll stop the discussion of the 6 o'clock part, because that does seem to be a little settled among this group. Obviously, David, you may have a difference of opinion there. But unless you want to make a motion to amend the CUP to change.
No,
that
I'm
time.
not making a
Okay,
motion.
so
I'll
we'll
vote.
move on to, so then the second question is, do we want to include something about deliveries before a certain time, the language that Mara presented to us a moment ago? And if someone would like to include that language, I am open for a motion to do so.
I would like a motion to include that language for deliveries to be on the Gore side if they are.
Would you mind coming forward and reading that language for us again, please, Mara? Thank you.
Access to the coffee shop use prior to 6 a.m. opening time will be from the Gore Street entrance.
But that's for
Sufficient.
customers, correct?
At
No.
all, anything, anybody.
So before 6 a.m., they're closed. Their operating hours, if you put them as they've already been drafted in the ordinance, are 6 a.m. No customers can come before 6 a.m. This is, as in every other set of operating, when you operate, that's the operating when customers arrive. Anything before that, which is behind doors of deliveries, prepping, all that other stuff is not considered part of that hours. So the concern was, if they're delivering their pastries after they've finished making them at 5:30 in the morning in order to be open at 6, what was that going to do in terms of noise and impact? And so this would prohibit them from using those rear doors prior to the 6 a.m. opening time, so that you would have less noise adjacent to the neighbors prior to that time.
Okay, so that's the language
Yes.
that you have just moved for. Do we have a second?
Second,
Is there any further discussion of the amendment? I think we can vote on the amendment.
Yes. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yeah.
Councilmember Richardson,
No.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
I have a question. I'm sorry, you asked me if we had questions. Why are we amending something that's already in?
It's not in the.
It's not, it's just a recommendation at this point.
I would like to stick with what we have already.
So then
So,
you're gonna-
So your vote is no.
no.
no? Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
okay, now we'll need a third reading.
Could you, I lost track of the vote.
We all vote.
So is the amendment passed?
Yes,
Okay. All right. May I have a motion for the third reading? Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion for the third and final reading and of bill number 9209 and its subsequent adoption.
Second,
Is
Bill
there
9.
Further discussion?
No.
You were just trying to get us. Go ahead.
I was trying to do my job. Bill 9209, third and final reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Telva LLC to allow a coffee shop, no drive-through use on an approximately 0.45 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 60 North Gore Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
All right. Is there further discussion? Let's vote.
call for the vote.
Call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right, thank you all. We will move now to the third reading of bill number 9210. If I could have a motion from Councilmember Alexander, please.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9210 and its subsequent adoption.
second,
Bill 9210, third reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the city of Webster Groves, a temporary construction easement to the Missouri American Water Company to relocate the water main along North Elm Avenue at Kirkham Avenue for the culvert replacement project.
Any discussion? I think we can vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
All right, we're moving now to bill number 9211. Councilmember Bliss, could you call for the third reading, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill 9211 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9211, third reading. An ordinance imposing a sales tax at a rate of 3% on all tangible personal property retail sales of adult use marijuana sold within the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, pursuant to Article 14, Section 2.6, subsection 5 of the Missouri Constitution, subject to the approval by the voters of the city at the general municipal election to be held on April 4th, 2023, designating the form of ballot and directing the city clerk to provide notice of said election.
Is there any discussion?
Yes. I just have a question. I was asked by one of our residents. Do we yet, or is it part of what we present to our residents on the ballot, targeted these funds for anything in particular, the revenue from this?
We have not.
Okay. And so is there a point at which we do that prior to the election where we indicate what we would like those funds targeted for? Or is it just funds that would just go into general revenue?
At this point, it's just funds that would go in the general revenue. The city manager and I did discuss today that at some point we need to decide whether we want to target these funds or not. We are not required to do that
Right.
on the ballot language.
That's
And if we do it on the ballot language, then we are essentially forever restricted to that
Okay.
area.
Okay.
But we can do it after the ballot language, and then that then is subsequent to change by council or future.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, even if we wanted to put it in the ballot language, that the election authority would accept it. Because the language on the ballot language that is proposed in these things is fairly rigid and set out in the statutes. And so you got to follow it because that's what the legislature has said we have to do. So if we tried to augment it by putting something like that in there, I think it would be problematic.
And I didn't want to, and I
Right.
wasn't suggesting that we did. I just didn't know if it had
Right.
something
Right.
like that attached to it
Right.
or not.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Is there additional discussion? Right, let's call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Large as it is.
The one thing.
No. All right, Councilmember Smith, could you call for the passage of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have appointed Mike Clay as a member of the library board as our appointment for today. We do have an executive closed session. Councilmember Bliss, if you could call for that.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session related to personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open friends 3, close friends, and negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021, open friends 12, close friends.
Second.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, thank you all who have attended our meeting. That ends our public portion of the meeting, and have a good couple of weeks.